My name's Karen Ripley, and I'm an entomologist with the U.S. Forest Service. I work in Portland, Oregon, and coordinate some invasive species response for Oregon and Washington, and have been involved as we've been preparing for the emerald ash borer, and then unfortunately the emerald ash borer arrived in the Pacific Northwest last summer. So the emerald ash borer is a little green beetle, Agrylus plenipennis. It's native to Eastern Asia. And although it's a wood-boring type beetle, similar to other beetles in the family, Buprestidae, the metallic wood-boring beetles, or the jewel beetles, it doesn't go deep into the trees. It causes damage when the larvae build tunnels, these sinuous galleries back and forth in the inner bark of the trees, which causes the tree to be girdled. They prefer ash. They also can infest other members of the olive family. So that includes, true olives that we get the olives for food, as well as an ornamental tree called white fringe tree. It doesn't infest mountain ash. Mountain ash, although that's the common name, mountain ash is in a different family and is not truly part of this olive family. So emerald ash borer has been present in the United States since about 2002. The map shows green where there are ash trees present, and the red dots show where the emerald ash borer has been detected. It got here originally to the US, to Michigan, probably on transportation ships or the wood dunnage material that they make to brace the loads, or on some kind of pallets or packing material. And it was slowly spreading away from Michigan. And then in 2013, it made a jump to Colorado. And by it probably did that with movement of firewood. It may have been associated with some nursery stock movements, which would have been a violation of the quarantine that was in existence at that time. By 2022, when it reached Oregon, Oregon's the 36th state to be infested. And we just, I think Josh said something like, it's not if it's going to come, it's when, and when landed on us last summer. The effect of emerald ash borer in the eastern United States has been really extreme and really grave. In most places, it kills 95 to 99% of the ash trees. Over 100 million ash trees have been killed since the 1990s. It's never been successfully eradicated, and it's had very high economic and ecological costs. This picture's commonly shown of a street in Toledo the left one was taken in June 2006, before the emerald ash borer was present. And pretty much 3 years later, all those mature ash trees had died. And here's what was seen in Forest Grove, Oregon last summer. It was an elementary school, and the parking lot had a couple of kind of surface water collection swales that had been planted with 16 small ash trees. And some of these ranged from about 4 to 6 inches diameter, and had been there about 12 years. And a fella noticed that the crowns were dying back, and so he went to investigate and was able to see on those trunks D-shaped exit holes. At that time, he was able to see the beetles themselves. And then when the bark was taken off some of those trees, you could see they were just riddled with these sinuous galleries going back and forth through the phloem. That infestation had probably been there 3 or 4 years before he saw it last summer. Now, although there are tons of different species of ash trees that have been planted in urban areas, ash is really resilient. It's a real workhorse for urban forestry because it can survive extremes of flooding, extremes of parched soils, and take all kinds of abuse. What we're most concerned about is Oregon ash, our native ash species, Fraxinus latifolia. And the map shows the range of Fraxinus latifolia, but it's really super important because as a riparian tree, it provides shading and bank stabilization, habitat for threatened and endangered species. We don't use a lot of wood products from ash, but it's commonly used. It's a very hard wood. In the East, one of the kind of hobby uses of it, or even industrial uses, it's traditionally been used for baseball bats and tool handles. Out here, I've heard that it's a cultural resource for making masks and paddles, but there isn't really an industrial use for ash other than sometimes it's used for firewood. The features of, it's really important if you're concerned about emerald ash borer to brush up on how to identify ash trees. And they have compound leaves with opposite branching. So not only are the little leaflets on the compound leaves set apart directly opposite from each other, the leaves on the branches are opposite as well, and the twigs are opposite. The Oregon ash grows in riparian areas, wetlands, and floodplains, and about 80% of Oregon ash occurs below 1,000 feet elevation, where it can be almost pure ash forests. Sometimes there'll be cottonwood with it, sometimes there'll be Oregon white oak and big leaf maple with it. So in 2018, the Oregon Invasive Species Council prepared an ash preparation and response plan, an emerald ash borer preparation and response plan. And this is one of the maps that shows Oregon ash presence in Western Oregon. And this map is, I think, more instructive about the risk of harm from the emerald ash borer. That these colored lines show different threatened and endangered salmon runs and how those coincide with the area that's most at risk of emerald ash borer. Both Lower Columbia coho, Upper Willamette steelhead, Upper Willamette chinook. So what people have been doing since it was caught and observed in Forest Grove, a lot of work has gone into visual surveys that can be done year round. If you're going on someone else's property, you need the landowner's permission. But there's an electronic data sheet in a program called Survey 123 that's available for people who've been trained to use it. And most of the public has been recommended to contact the Invasive Species Council's report an invader hotlines or apps for their reporting when they suspect that there's been they've seen emerald ash borer. In the winter, it's probably easiest to see bark cracks that display and reveal these tunnels underneath, places where woodpeckers have been feeding, and really very late in the symptoms come these D-shaped exit holes. Often the first couple of generations of emerald ash borers attacking an otherwise healthy tree require a 2-year life cycle. So they've already been there a couple years before they make these characteristic D-shaped exit holes. And they also often generally start up high in the canopy. So it's too high up for us to see those. So you need to look for canopy features, branch dieback, water sprouts and epicormic shoots, And then, when the leaves aren't there, this woodpecker feeding and bark cracks have proven to be good, reliable symptoms. The Oregon Department of Agriculture has set up this Survey 123 program, and different people have been reporting ash trees and that they've checked with the visual survey. And to date, there have been over 9,000 trees evaluated. Those are the gray diamonds if they do not suspect there's emerald ash borer there. And the trees with confirmed emerald ash borer, there have been 39, all quite close to Forest Grove City. Most of them have been urban street trees and park trees and the trees at the elementary school. But there are some creeks that go through here, and there are infestations in the ash trees, the native Oregon ash that grow along those creeks. It's not far from the Tualatin River, which leads down to the Willamette, which leads to the Columbia. This area of Forest Grove is about 25 miles to the west of Portland and about 15 miles south of the Washington border.
Karen, you have about 4 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So another thing people are doing this spring is trapping for the emerald ash borer. Unfortunately, we don't have a reliable lure that can draw in the emerald ash borer. So these traps that are used, a purple panel trap or a green funnel trap, are baited just with a leaf volatile, something that the crushed leaves of ash would give off. So they have to be placed high in the tree near the leaves, and they don't have really high success rate of drawing the beetles in. The best way to attract emerald ash borer is to girdle trees, and you girdle them in the spring after the leaves have emerged, and then the beetles will come and attack these trees and infest them. You have to go back in the fall and cut this tree down and peel the bark off to see if you can find the emerald ash borer larvae underneath. There are chemical treatments that will protect trees from the emerald ash borer. They can be injected or used as a soil drench. They tend to be expensive, $100 to $300 a tree, and require repeat applications every 1 to 3 years. So this isn't feasible on a large scale. Another long-term response to emerald ash borer is the release of biocontrol organisms. There were 4 different wasps that were collected in its native range in Asia and have been brought to the US and tested here. 3 of them would survive in the climate of the Pacific Northwest, and 2 release sites have been selected near Forest Grove, Oregon, and these wasps will be released this spring. Unfortunately, these wasps, it takes a while for their populations to build, and they're always lagging behind the emerald ash borer. And so it's unlikely that these wasps will be able to help save the big trees. And so our expectation should really be that when emerald ash borer gets there, all the mature ash trees on that site, all the ash trees bigger than about 3 inches diameter, will die within about 10 years. It's going to be a really serious effect. So a strategy that you could have now is there's a quarantine put out by the Oregon Department of Agriculture in Washington County. So if you're in Washington County or kind of 6 to 30 miles away, you need to start thinking about what's going to happen when emerald ash borer gets to my land. You should try and understand what ash you have and what ecological functions do you want to preserve or costs you want to mitigate when the first wave passes. There's going to be a lot of dead trees out there. You'll have to think about hazard trees. You'll have to think about how to remove them to provide safety. So you'll want to make a plan to protect the important trees. The only way to really do that is with chemicals. you'll want to prepare for revegetation and reduce the hazards of the anticipated dead trees. You can monitor to determine when the emerald ash borer gets to your property. And there are strategies to provide direct control and monitoring. These strategies are called slow ash mortality. And a lot of it relates to creating trap trees by girdling trees and then removing them, which reduces the population of the ash borer.
Just about a minute left.
Okay, this is my last slide that just provides, especially this website, www.oregoneab.com. That's a place that has all sorts of, it's kind of a hub with information about the emerald ash borer in Oregon. And we've just started putting on a monthly bulletin that provides updates about what's going on with the response to emerald ash borer. So that's a really good resource for it. Another thing to be concerned about is the movement of firewood. When these trees start dying, they'll carry the emerald ash borer larvae with them, and we don't want to spread it further than it already is centered on Forest Grove. So thank you for your attention, and I will be able to answer questions in the chat or in the discussion period later this hour. Thank you.
Submitted to a diagnostic lab, and there's a rapid, if you will, ELISA that only takes a day or two to do. It's not like an animal side test, or the animal, the tissues are looked at under the microscope using a special stain to see the accumulation of prions. We really can't reliably diagnose the disease in live animals. We need the head of the animal after death to make the diagnosis for sure.
2 minutes.
Okay, so again, some final take-home messages. I would argue this is the most important disease in wildlife. It's a unique class of disease, being a prion disease, and these environments are contaminated for a long time once they become contaminated. We really need to be doing surveillance, particularly in areas where the disease hasn't been identified yet. If you ever have an animal that you think might have chronic wasting disease, the best thing is to take the head. There's a portion of the brain and retropharyngeal lymph node, it's called, that can be submitted for testing. Remember, don't shoot the animal in the head if it's a CWD suspect, because we want that brain tissue intact. The disease is not known to be transmitted to humans, but CDC recommends that these animals, if they're CWD suspects, not be consumed by humans. And if you'd like to know more, there's lots and lots of literature out there on CWD now, but Escobar has a nice review paper. So if you have additional questions about surveillance or about submitting samples, please let me know, and I'm always happy to talk more.